Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. Happy New Year to all. Happy peaceful change of power day here in Massachusetts. We don't storm our capitals on days of our political transitions. Unlike other parts of the nation. What do you think, Jonathan? We got a quorum?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, we have a quorum.
All right. Why don't I read the statement? If you can put that up for me, please. Thank you. So welcome to the Administration and Finance Committee of the Boston Region MPO. I'm going to call this meeting to order. We have a quorum. I'm going to read now the notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning processes, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, veteran status, or background. These are the meeting guidelines. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself and include your name, first name, last name, and affiliation. Participants may mute and unmute themselves, but please always remain muted unless you're actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please use the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking on either the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and the window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar, and I will then call upon participants. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Mr. Jonathan Church via the chat box, and via email at jchurch@ctps.org, or via phone at 857-702-3709. This is the accessibility statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standard and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Jonathan Church, MPO staff, via the chat, via email at jchurch@ctps.org, or 857-702-3709. Introductions. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Kane. I'm the Executive Director of the MBTA Advisory Board, and I have the honor to chair the Administration and Finance Committee of the Boston Region MPO. Jonathan, why don't you call the roll and folks can introduce themselves, and how we'll do that.
Okay, MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Mass DOT OTP.
Good morning, Derek Cravat from MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning.
Regional Transportation Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins from the Advisory Council here.
And City of Boston.
Bill Conroy, representing Mayor Wu in the city of Boston.
Great. That calls the roll, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you everyone for being here. We'll now move on to public comments. If any member would like to, or any person would like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand function and we will call upon you. I believe we can only take public comments from humans at this point, so I think I'm correct in saying that. No AI public comments yet. Seeing no one raising their hand, we'll move on to our first item of business, which is a discussion of the Operations Plan MPO work products by the inestimable Jonathan Church. Take it away, Jonathan, please.
Okay, Logan, if you can put the shared version up when you get a chance, that would be great. This was sent out to everyone back in December when we put together the items of how the workflow and process for various pieces of how we coordinate with how we do the pieces with the tip, but also with operations plan and how we do various elements in workflow and process. I did receive comments from 3 members, and from what we discussed at the end of the last meeting, those comments were put into this document, but there didn't seem to be any feedback at the time when we last met on 12/15. That seemed to be out of the ordinary, and I haven't received any comments further since then. So I think what we have here is pretty standard. I didn't know if anybody had any comments today to discuss, but I think the process of what we do in terms of coordinating with our certification documents, and how those board meeting agendas, minutes, committee agendas, and how we coordinate with OTP and various elements are outlined here, and I'm happy to take questions at this point.
Any questions for Jonathan? So we spent a good bit of time discussing this in November and December, so I think this is old hat for us, but I think we just wanted to make sure that everyone had weighed in
Mhm.
and that folks were comfortable with this going forward. Logan, can you just scroll down a little bit just so folks can have a look at some of the bottom sections? Slow down. Yeah, so basically this is the discussion that we had around tip selection criteria, the discussion of a technical committee if we decide to go down that road, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like I said, I think we've made good progress on this piece of it. I had a pretty robust discussion. I just wanted to make sure that we were good, and if anybody had any final things, please let us know. We're not going to necessarily vote on this today. I think we'll do that at our next meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan. Actually, so our next one is a budget one, so we'll do this at our next, whatever we're calling this, operations plan discussion. So I
Yeah,
guess this
Brian.
is, sorry.
I was just going to, just for clarification, we don't have to vote on each section of these necessarily, but happy to sort of revisit it if there's, a reason to sort of clarify certain things. The other thing I wanted to add, and yes, the next ANF committee meeting will be a budget focused meeting. So it will be the meeting after that we'll come back to the operations plan. The other thing that we'll be doing soon that came out of this conversation and the committee conversation will be going to the full board at some point soon to talk about the proposal that you've all seen about a committee that can sort of dive deeper into the tip related issues throughout the year. So just wanted to add those.
Go ahead, Len.
Yeah, I was trying to find the section where it says that, I think the state is supposed to provide us with something, and I'm sorry, I can't find the section, but well, I'll say the other thing, So with regard to the section on minutes, I mean, we might want to note that with some committee meetings, I mean, they are summary notes, not minutes, or do you think that's not a distinction without a difference?
I guess I don't have an opinion about summary notes versus minutes. I'm comfortable with less than I think a lot of other people are, but that's just on me. Do we have, do you remember what we were trying to talk about there, what the state is supposed to give us? Anyone? Or are you good on that one, Len?
I'm good on it for now.
All right, why don't we do this? Why don't we say last call for comments on this particular section? Logan, Jonathan, can you just send it out one more time to everybody? Or send the link to the Google Doc, and we'll say, we'll consider this put to bed by our next operations plan meeting if we hear no additional comments. Okay. That work for everybody? All right. So last call on this section, and it will be sent around again.
Okay. Well, I'll just say briefly what the general thought was on it, and that is that it was something that was supposed to be provided by up to us by another party, and so I mean I'm fine with us saying that we're going to do something because it was a shall versus will situation, and so if we are dependent on another body to do something, then oh sorry, I heard some background. Then I'm a little concerned about where that places us if they don't do it. So
Mhm.
so do you understand like the general concern about that?
I do.
Yeah.
I think, and I think this part of this section also discusses the need of all member entities, including municipalities, to come forward with information in a timely manner. So I guess I would say, yes, the dependency is a concern. However, we all have to depend on one another. And there has to be a certain level of trust for this whole thing to work. So yes, Len, I share your
Yeah.
concerns, but I also want to be optimistic and give folks the benefit of the doubt. And I guess I would also say that if we go along with this and feel as if it's not working, we can always revisit it. And I think the technical committee prototype is also going to help a lot with the information sharing at a deep level for those that really want to get into the weeds.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And that actually you did kind of help me find, we were talking about it. So it's an improvement of tip related information, then to project information and dissemination. And then the first bullet point is the implementing agencies shall keep the Boston Region MPO informed of project status on a regular basis to support MPO planning, so yeah, so it's like, well, I guess are they doing that now? I mean, at the rate that we would like?
Yes.
Okay.
None
Alright.
of this is, well, I mean, I guess if that's a subjective question, and is it the rate that we would like? That's up to the individuals. None of the operations plan per se is to slap anybody on the wrist and say it's not being done. It's to write down kind of what the process already is so that we can codify it. So part of what our goal here is to write down kind of what we're already doing or should be doing. And then part of it, then there's going to have to be some ongoing work to sort of say this is and isn't happening. Tegan, I see your hand is up. Maybe you can say that more eloquently than me.
No, I think what you're saying is fine. I just wanted to provide some clarification, which I think is really relevant for this conversation. Len, the particular section that you're looking at, it actually comes out of the MOU, I think, if I've tracked
Right.
it to the right place.
Yeah.
And the MOU also states other things around how there's an agreement that there will be, quarterly updates from Mass DOT on project status, that the implementing agencies shall, provide this information. So these are actually MOU elements. I think that some of those things could always be discussed and reframed as something like, if that information isn't provided, then the outcome may be that, something can't be funded in the current year. But regardless, those are part of the MOU topics, and we've tried to avoid requiring anything in the operations plan that can't be provided, and instead try to figure out ways to develop structures for collaboration and coordination, like that TIP committee structure that we proposed through your feedback. So I think it's good to note. It's also important to note that the one corrective action in this year's federal certification report is to make an update to the MOU. So there'll be a need to talk about the MOU in the coming 9 months or so. So you can always think about whether you want to bring those topics up then.
Okay, so great, and thanks. And then as Brian, that you did kind of address, it was the last bullet point that I was a bit concerned about because I mean, we don't have representatives from all municipalities being on the board, and so we have people from each region, and yes, I guess it is a matter of trust, but I let me think about some more about how to maybe put some teeth into it. I'm fine with it as it is. This is kind of late in the game, and I'm not going to hold it up by any stretch on this. But I like, and I guess teeth isn't the right word. Maybe some more incentive or something to just make it a more likely that this is to happen. Because it's not clear to me that this one is happening. So
Right.
okay, that's it. Thanks.
No, thanks, Len. And you're not wrong. And please don't take my my response as not agreeing with you. I agree with you in a lot of ways. I guess I would, just to follow up on what Hagan said, suggest that some of that is kind of outside the scope of the operations plan and more an MOU question, which we talked about very early on in this process, how to kind of deal with that. So yeah, we do have to tackle some of those bigger issues around incentives and carrots and sticks. But I guess I would think that's outside the scope of this operations plan
Yeah,
for right now.
That's fine.
So,
Yeah,
so thank you.
it's okay to disagree with me. So
Far be it from me to ever disagree with the poet laureate of transportation planning in Massachusetts.
Yes. Mr. Kingspear.
All right, so we're going to leave this as last call on this section. Logan, Jonathan, please send it around again, or the link to the Google Doc, please. And if anybody has any sort of final comments, questions, concerns, please get them in and we can address them. Otherwise, we're going to try to hope that this is kind of put to bed more or less. Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's go to the next section, please. And Len, can you just lower your hand when you get a
Yes, sorry
chance?
about that. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry.
Okay, discussion of the operations plan, the executive director position, whomever that might be. So this was not sent out in advance, but we're going to try to put something up, I understand, and kind of begin the process. Tegan, do you want to introduce it?
Yeah, so what we can do is we do have a document that we've put together. We looked at the process for specifically the hiring of the last process for hiring the executive director, which, as Brian said, is me. We looked at the process that was shared with the A&F committee at the time, and then layered on some kind of understanding of practices of other boards and other procedures out there, and can propose a structure for going through a hiring process for an executive director that sets it up in advance so it doesn't have to be thought about in the moment, when the issue arises. There are other aspects of this role that we have that are in the memo to discuss around the sort of evaluation and review and salary adjustments for the executive director that we don't have a document put together to share with you. And Brian, I'll leave that to you to talk about. But in the meantime, we can walk you through what we have in terms of a suggested process, and then we can share this document with you after the fact. So if we could bring up the clean sort of draft version of the process, that would be great. So one thing we'll do is we will share also a link. Eric Barassa, you were kind enough to share with us sort of a memo, I think, or a document that was shared with the A&F committee a few years back, three or 4 years back, that had a process that was specific at the time.
It was the full MPO we shared that with.
Oh, it was the full MPO, sorry. So that document was pretty specific, though. It listed names and people participating in certain aspects of it. And so what we did was we tried to take a step back, generalize it, and then layer on a process that we thought was relevant for sort of boards more generally. So in this document, first of all, just to highlight the first section here, this is what we said we would talk about in the operations plan, which you can always add to or subtract from as you see fit. That we define the hiring process and recruitment process, and that we'd also clarify the process for the approval of the evaluation and salary adjustment for the executive director. And like I said, I'll not talk about the second bullet right now. The MOU does not say anything about this, so this is really just completely undefined. The last certification review noted that there's no documented process to go through the replacement of the executive director. So they, obviously called that out, and that's what we're trying to address here. So if you can scroll down to draft for consideration. So again, this is just a draft, totally open to your discussion and critique. It doesn't look exactly like the last process. It looks a little bit different. But the idea would be to establish at the beginning a kind of a hiring committee, sort of a core committee that doesn't necessarily make up one of the individual review teams, but that it would be a committee that would make some of the early decisions and decisions throughout on what kinds of candidates would be interviewed, how the recruitment might take place, whether there needs to be an acting executive director in the interim, and start to draft things like interview questions. And for now, what we've put forward is that be the MPO chair and vice chair, which I think is usual in what happened last time. And then leave a choice for sort of a third entity that could provide some perspective that might be a representative from one of the more regional representatives or a municipal board member. So that could be selected, as it makes sense at that time based on maybe who's volunteering or who's viewed to be a good candidate for that executive hiring committee. And that executive hiring committee would determine the membership of the initial candidate review team and a finalist review team. So 2 separate teams. You can scroll down a bit. So that initial, the chair, vice chair, and one other entity would also think about the attributes and qualifications needed for the executive director. And we highlighted here an opportunity to engage the staff of the MPO and board members in this process. There was an attempt to incorporate the staff in the process in the last round as well. And we thought this would be a nice way to be able to do it, to submit some kind of survey of the agency staff and the board members on what the key kind of attributes and qualifications might be needed for an executive director at that time. Excuse me for stumbling over my words. I still have a cold. And then the MPO staff can support implementing that. Then the idea would be that hiring committee would also either review an existing or develop a new job description, do things like confirm the accuracy of the organizational chart, and again, mentioning if there's a need for an acting executive director, and then develop a job announcement. And then that executive committee would also determine the salary range. I do want to note that the agency does now have a compensation plan, so that is a good reference to be able to use for that process, but it leaves the decision up to this committee. And scroll down, please. And then we start to get into some different sort of combinations of folks where the chair and vice chair would actually also collaborate with the fiduciary agent who is responsible fiscally for CTPS for the staff to the MPO, could confer on posting and advertising of the position because there would be funds associated with that. So since there's a fiscal implication, that could be a way to determine that. And then also look into the interview questions. So there may be actually a couple of inconsistencies here. I apologize, but we can clear those up before we send them out. I think it's the executive interview team that should be talking about the interview questions. So then if you scroll down a bit more to number 7, you start to engage a candidate review team that would actually review all the resumes and applications that would come in and do an initial screening. And then there would be a first interview round, and that there would be an evaluation form and recommendations could be made to the hiring committee, the executive hiring committee, to then advance candidates to the second round. And then if you could scroll down a little bit more, we also incorporate updates to staff in the process and an engagement of a staff person to help manage the process. So that would be an important way also to engage staff. And then there'd be a finalist interview and then a recommendation made by that finalist interview team. The expectation is that the board would have a discussion with a final candidate or multiple final candidates. And then there would be formal approval by the board itself in an executive session. If you scroll down, I believe that is it for now. So that's a summary of the process. I think there's a couple of edits we need to make, and then we can send this out for your consideration and review. Those of you who went through it the last round might have some interesting comments or questions, but I also think people with a fresh perspective could maybe call out where you think that there are good practices and here are gaps.
Thanks, Dagan. I think it's great that we're trying to get ahead of this without the pressure of having to somehow find someone to step into your very large and very fashionable shoes. But thank you. Eric, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the more we can do to create a really good structure here, whenever, the time comes, whatever, in some, hopefully long in the future, we will have a good process that folks can just jump right into and have clarity. One question I have here, and I look forward to, reviewing this more outside the meeting, is the executive committee, or whatever we're calling it, that sort of like creates a process, do they kind of create a memo that identifies the specifics, some of the, like, exactly who will be on what committees, and then do they seek the full board approval of that?
That is not currently specified in this process, and I think that's a really reasonable thing to consider. And so we talked about them developing multiple materials, but didn't specify a process for putting it into a memo and approval.
I think it would be a good step to say that that group will, we'll kind of put that into a document, and then that will be reviewed by the full board. So that's the opportunity for the full board to have an early weigh in on the process.
I agree, Eric. Good call. And I also think it's important to say that if the MPO decided to have a executive committee, hiring committee, whatever we're calling it, of more than 3 people, it could always do that. This is just kind of a plan. It's up to the full board to say what it says.
A couple other things, and like just my memory of the process, and I don't know if we want to put it into this document. There's sort of, I think in here we talk about like whether we want to promote someone to like an interim director or something like that. I think when we did that, we also gave those people like an increased compensation for that time as well. And we might want to identify that opportunity here. Sort of commensurate with taking on more, because honestly, it can be 6 months, that person is acting as interim, director.
Yeah, we can add consideration of, we can add that, and we can, again, I would suggest we reference the compensation plan as sort of a baseline.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And again, like, I mean, we don't, I think if this creates the framework, and then like we said, that additional memo at the time that the executive committee does can kind of go into more detail on some of those things. But so far this looks pretty good, and I'll review it offline and probably have some more, comments, but thanks for a great start.
Here, here. Yeah, thanks, Eric. And I know you were on that team the last time, so we're gonna be leaning on you a lot to help us on this one. And again, the important thing here is not necessarily to have every single step in the process perfect. It's to have a framework that allows the MPO to work with, and also kind of allows us to get started a little quicker than perhaps maybe we did last time, because we have something in writing that says this is the process we'll go through. And so we're not reinventing the wheel every time. We've been very lucky at CTPS to have had very few executive directors in its history. I think Barney was here forever. I believe was his official time. So we're lucky, but nevertheless, it is good practice to have something like this that sort of says how it'll work. So Tegan, the plan is to send this around and ask for comments. Can you go up to the compensation part, the second bullet that you said you wouldn't discuss? So I can talk about that. I think what we're going to do, what I would suggest we do, folks, is the next time we meet as a ANF committee to discuss the operations plan, we should go into executive session to discuss the question of the executive director's compensation and oversight, all that kind of good stuff, or really awkward stuff. What I'm going to do, and Eric, I'm going to look at you here. I'm going to email, I think it's the MAPC legal counsel. Is that Margie? And just ask her for guidance on going into executive session as an MPO committee. I assume she's the person to ask. And I just want to make sure we do it.
If we need, I mean, Margie would be the right person to ask for a recommendation on how you do that and maintain like public, public meeting requirements.
Absolutely.
She absolutely would know that.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And we want to make sure that we're meeting all of our OML requirements while also being able to do things right. I know the T, when they go into executive session, always has a recommendation or something from their general counsel. So I'll just ask her, and I'll copy you on it, Eric, just to make sure that we're all in the same loop.
Okay.
And then, so we'll put that on our agenda for not our next ANF meeting, but the one after, to discuss that and all the good stuff that comes with it. So I guess our homework on this one is take a first pass at this. Everybody get your comments in to Tegan. I can send those to you. You can send them to me, either one. And we will pick this up next time we discuss the operations plan. Okay. All right. I think that's it on the agenda, unless anybody has any member comments.
Before we go to member comments, I just want to recognize that Dennis Giambetti has joined us, and I just want to
Hey.
put it in the record that he is here as one of the members.
Dennis, thank you for being here. Dennis, I see your hand is up. You can, if you want to unmute and say hello, I think it's *9.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I was late in attending, but I got the drift of the last few minutes of discussion. I have one question. Does it make sense for us to be put on the MPO agenda in the next sometime this month, just to give them an update of where we are at with the process and kind of give them some highlights, so that if we're way off base, we get some pushback on some things that we can come back and maybe reconvene a little bit around some of those issues, just to kind of give them an update. Because when we get the final document, it's going to be somewhat overwhelming to folks to review it all, because there's many aspects to it. So just a thought.
Yeah, Dennis, you're not wrong. And something I've thought about as well. And the answer is yes, I do want to do that. I guess I just want to give it a little bit of time to shake out in terms of the administration switchover. See who the new secretary is and if there's going to be any other changes, because we don't know. But once that's all settled, yes, I want to have a detailed discussion.
That makes sense. Good. Yep. Good. Yep.
All right. Thanks, Dennis. Tegan, please go ahead.
I have two things, if that's okay. One, in response to what Dennis said, one topic we will need to bring to the board, and probably would sometime in perhaps February, I think is my best guess. I need to confirm that, is the discussion with the full board on the idea of the TIP process and engagement committee. So that's an opportunity to give the board sort of a light update, but focus in on one topic that's particularly needing to be discussed at the full board level. So that'll be a nice touch point. And then since I see a bunch of other hands came up, I think I will wait then with my second item, which was to think about teeing up another agenda topic for a future meeting, but I'll pause because I saw other hands.
Okay. Eric, please go ahead.
Well, on that point, I was just wondering, do we have a list of what are the outstanding things in the operations plan? And maybe we could send those around, because it'd be nice to just know what's left and what do we need to discuss at future meetings.
Yes,
I
we
can
have
answer.
that.
That. We do
Please.
have an outstanding list, and we can send that around what is outstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah, please do that. Good call, Eric. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, Brian, you might have been in a holiday fog, but the new secretary is Gina Fiandaca, my former boss at the Boston Transportation Department.
Yeah, of course. I thank you, Bill.
Okay.
It's more a question of if she will make any changes to anything
Yeah, I know.
affecting the MPO. Who knows?
I got you. No, Gina's pretty good. Yeah.
Oh, we're glad Gina's back from Austin.
Yeah, okay.
Their loss is our gain, and Monica Tibbetts not as well. So
Yeah, I'm happy as well. So
yeah, it'd be great.
Great.
Thank you. Tegan, why don't you follow back up?
Thanks. If you agree, Brian, since we have a few extra minutes, I thought it would be helpful to queue up a topic that I'd like to reintroduce to this group. Okay, thank you. And that will be in an upcoming one. It'll be one of the remaining topics to resolve in the coming month or two as we wrap up the operations plan. And that was an earlier conversation that we had around expectations for board and committee members, and something that we discussed briefly was a code of conduct, which can be called a number of things. But it's a bit of a deeper dive into sort of defining the type of behavior that the board supports in terms of interaction between board members and with staff, and also with the public in general. And we have a bit of that in the draft operations plan. But since then, I've been doing a bit of research and I've been talking with staff, and I've also had some conversations with the chair, the vice chair, and Brian about this. But there's some strong recommendations. In particular, I was looking at a Massachusetts Municipal Management Association webinar for Massachusetts in particular, but I also talked with AMPO, which is the National Association of MPOs, and others to determine that there is a recommendation to have something like a code of conduct or behavioral norms on the record. And since we're going through this process, it does seem like a good time to go back to this and to define it. And the reason why is to genuinely just have a framework in which to be able to engage in conversations if there is genuinely offensive behavior or perceived offensive behavior before it escalates to the point of a complaint. And this does happen between elected officials. This can happen between staff and board members. This can happen between committee members. It can happen between board members and the public. And again, it's not really necessarily a document with tons and tons of teeth or ramifications, but it provides a framework to have those conversations, and it tends to de-escalate or allow us to address issues as they arise in a way that is just kind of expected and consistent. It is something that is commonly done in municipalities and on other boards, not just in Massachusetts. There are a few less examples that I could find in Massachusetts, but certainly there are some and across the country. And some of the Massachusetts Municipal Management Association, others have references for where these have been implemented. So it's kind of it's a good way to cover ourselves, but it's also a really good way to put out there if this board does want to progress towards being diverse and inclusive as a board. It's an actual pretty important framework to have in place to give people a sense of confidence that that's the direction that the board wants to move in. So what we'd like to do is take some of those recommendations, share with you some examples across the country, but also locally, and propose a kind of a document that you could all consider adopting as a board to move forward to sort of provide these frameworks for discussion. I see some hands go up, so I can pause there.
I think it's a great idea. Len, please go ahead.
Yes, I think it's a good idea. And I mean, kind of along those lines, I was thinking about how should board members communicate directly with staff. I was thinking about that because I wanted to do some follow-up myself with some staff that had done some presentations, and I was thinking, well, I'll CC Jonathan on all of them, but then I was like, well, I want to have a little paragraph there to let people know that this isn't, to be trying to make you do it. It's really more of a courtesy, and to let your manager know that this request is being made of your time. And so I mean, I guess I can ask that question now, like, is that preferred? But also I think we maybe should spell that out, because I mean, you could envision a situation where a lot of board members are now trying to interact with staff, and their time is allotted. And so yeah, I think let's add that to the list if it wasn't included in what you were discussing, Kagan.
Absolutely, Len. That is something that in particular also in cities and towns, for example, providing some of that sort of like protection of staff being able to sort of develop priorities and not just be dictated by like single demands of their time on a constant basis, but also even AMPO kind of has that kind of structure in it, so that there's just a basic respect that there is an executive director of the staff, and that the final decisions on sort of those kinds of prioritizations do end up lying with the executive director to implement, and the executive director is answerable to the board, right? So it keeps the individual staff members from feeling like they have to respond if they're feeling pressured without sort of approval from their colleagues. So that kind of language is absolutely part of this kind of structure. And again, it's rarely an issue, but it's a really helpful thing to have in case, we do have an experience that does actually go way outside of that. I don't think we've experienced that, so I'm not saying that that exists, but it's great to have it there in case it does.
Yeah. And I mean, in my case, I feel, given my history, with CTPS, I feel very friendly towards a lot of people, but also my experience with Arlington government makes me like really aware of the fact that you really have to protect staff. At the same time, you want to make people feel welcome to interact. And so I think along with that has to be some, and this is probably more of wouldn't be formalized, be more of a practice, that we emphasize to folks, that you are welcome to interact with staff, but please respect this layer that we put in just to protect staff, so, and I wouldn't use that word, I'm kind of using it here, but another word for it. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Len. So Dennis and Bill, your hands are up. Is that from before, or do you have new questions? If you do, just unmute and,
Sorry, Brian.
before,
I'll
from
take it
before.
down.
Sorry.
oh, nope, no need to apologize. It's cool. Just want to make sure you're recognized. So yeah, so I think the sense of the committee is that, yes, it's a good idea to move ahead with the beginning this process. I think a code of conduct is probably helpful. It like you said, it provides a framework for the board to consider things. And of course, like I said before in the other discussion, it's always up to the full board, but it's good to have a place to start and refer to. So, and if my comments on your footwear earlier violated that, I'm very sorry. But thank you. Any member items before we wrap up in advance of the MPO? Len, your shoes are terrible.
Well, I was thinking you're the one with the fancy boots, I'm sure. So.
I have grippy slippers on at the moment. I will not lie, because my feet are cold. And let the record reflect that my feet are cold. Any member items?
Oh my goodness, I love these meetings.
All right, seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I
I'll
get
make
the
a
fun.
motion.
Without
must we end the fun?
objection, we are adjourned. I'll see you all in 18 minutes. Thanks.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.